Thank you for that nice introduction. And good afternoon, everybody. I'm very honored to be invited to speak to you about a quite big thing called the role of science in crisis, how to make wise decisions. That's a very big question, and let me start. But first, I'd like to also tell that my presentation is held by Thomas Robertson. He is our TIEMS, the Regional Director for North America. So I will start by Hans Das did give you an overview of certain recent crises. So I will just show you this picture and say the world is at risk. It is facing more disasters with much higher frequency and impact. And going to the ENG which we also use, and this data is collected from the ENG. In 2022, world faced 387 natural hazards and disasters, resulting in the loss of more than 30,000 lives and affecting 185 million individuals. And disaster also have a cost, and the economic losses were about 313 billion, with less than half of it was insured. Going further, I would like to say something which Barack Obama said. We are the first generation to feel the impact of climate change, and the last generation that can do something about it. And because we, as said, increasing frequency, magnitude, and numbers of people impacted, and huge economic damage. And there is still a lot of inequalities among population worldwide, and worsening poverty and deprivation. And COVID-19 that showed us it could affect millions of people all over the world, and the Russian war, and now also the Israeli war, is a tragedy and have a huge impact worldwide. So just take a look at this. There is a lot of typical scenarios of disasters and climate change. I don't want to list them, but all this the civil protection have to handle, and there will probably be more in the future. But what I'm talking about is how science support crisis response in several ways. And it can help individuals, organizations, and governments to make wise decisions in response to crisis. It can be used to predict when can a crisis happen. We can look at the risk of it to happen. We can understand the situation during the crisis if we collect data, and we can develop plans based on the data we have, and we can provide a basis for effective communication about crisis. So everything starts with data, and going back to EM data, these are more data of different things. For example, we have satellites taking data around the world. We have weather data, which we can forecast, tsunamis, etc. We have a global seismologic network telling about earthquakes. Earthquakes is not easy to predict. They are still working on different methods to do that. We have surveillance drones, and we have tsunami warning systems, and also wastewater was used in order to monitor the COVID-19. We have historical data, and all this type of data is very important when we are going to use science in predicting what can happen and how can a crisis develop. And for example, historical data can reveal frequency of lightning strikes that might start wildfires, and we have seen a lot of wildfires this year. Data on vegetation can be used to predict wildfire spread. For example, you recently saw what happened in Hawaii, where there was actually non-topic grass, which burned very fast and really developed this spread of the wildfire in Hawaii. And we can look at waters, we can accumulate data and look how can flood develop. Oceanographic and atmospheric data can predict weather and droughts, and demographic data of population living close to can then be evacuated, or we can do changes to where we can build. So all these types of data can be used to guide us in a response. And we have different models that can find the answer in data. For example, statistical models to predict floods. How do they develop? How can we protect? What should we do in that case? Simulation models, for example, it was Hans Das, he talked about possible mass evacuation, which is a quite difficult task. And you can predict where should people go, where could the evacuation routes. For example, on a rig in the North Sea, for example, Norway is very much involved in oil industry in the rig. And one criteria is the owner have to demonstrate that the rig can be evacuated before the evacuation routes break down. You need a model in order to see if that's possible. And what we have recently also got in is artificial intelligence, which can compute a lot of data in a fast time and give us feedback on possible things that can happen. And big data, use big data, fast computers, and AI. When you look what happens, what the news say about big data, someone is scared. Is this artificial intelligence a threat, or can it be used for something valuable? And I just recently, last week actually, attended a conference in Prague about critical infrastructure. And artificial intelligence data came up as a question. One expert said, artificial intelligence is a big risk, but it's also a big gain if you use it the right way. For one example, the Hurricane Katrina, all remember that one in New Orleans, covered in the news. And it happened in 2005, 1,836 died, and there was 100 billion US dollar in damage, and 300,000 homes was destroyed. And 1.5 people were evacuated. And actually, the prediction of this hurricane was quite good. But what they had overseen was that the protection was, the piles were not done properly. So they were over, the water went over the protection, and that caused the big flooding. And we also saw in Fukushima, for example, there was a cascading event, and the war, they haven't predicted the tsunami, which then put flood, went over the dams that protected the Fukushima atomic power plant. And science is also good to predicting things. And here you can see prediction is difficult, and you must know how to use the data in order to come up with the right answer. And here you see different cases. For example, the World Health Organization, they predicted when the Ebola happened, a few hundred, while CDC predicted 1.4 million. The actual, 29,000. So you have to understand how to use the data. The same peak in the Guinea cases. They said, the UK aid said it has passed in August. But the cases were actually larger in December with 150 per week. And US cases, Stanford Medicine, quite possibly every major city will see at least a handful of cases, but 4 total cases in US. So when you use the data, you also have to put them into a right model, and you have to know about the possibility that this is not correct, and you have to update the models. I will come back to this project, which we have just recently participated in, and tell you a little bit more about it later. The conclusion on, I'm not concluding the presentation, but I'm concluding about use of data and science in prediction and warnings. Our world is increasingly faced with crises associated with climate change and natural disasters, as well as accident and human actions. Science can be used for analyzing data, prediction, risk assessment, and understanding the situation in planning and how it will develop. But authorities need to understand and have confidence in the scientific results, and also necessary safeguard to ensure that the appropriate application of the science. And also understanding and the transparency concerning the limitation of science. You saw the prediction of Ebola. The different institutions came up with different answers. So you have to understand what is the limitation and the proper use of data. And another thing which is important, communication and engagement in a crisis, we saw in the pandemic, is very important. And you need to be sure of what you present is based on scientific evidence. Before I finish, I will tell you a little bit about my organization and how we engage in research and use scientific data. TIEMS, we celebrated our 30th anniversary this year. We are a volunteer organization, and we were founded in Washington, D.C. in 1993. And we are today registered as a non-profit NGO in Brussels. And I've worked for this organization pro bono, voluntarily, for 30 years. So that is a long practice with this. Actually, we did our annual conference in South Africa, where we focused on crisis, emergency, and disasters, a continuum of challenges and opportunities in the 21st century. And what was important and what an observation, they have a very young population in South Africa, and the young student at this university they were amazing how engaged and devoted they were to learn about emergency management. That was a very good observation. And TIEMS, we have a vision and a mission, and TIEMS works to achieve its mission through the exchange of information, innovation, and good practices in education, training, and certification, and research and development activities. We are not operational, we are educational, and we are not seen on the scenes. We have different activities. We do conferences and workshops, the one I just mentioned. We do webinars, and we have invited, actually we've done webinars about the civil protection, how they perform their duties and how they do their organization, most over Europe, and research and development activities. And we also have an international certification. And we are looking into how can, for example, artificial intelligence be used in analytics and as a communication tool. And as I said, for example, lessons learned is something we all talk about in civil protection. And what is the first lesson learned? We never learn. And actually to be proper with collecting data, saving data, and use them, for example, by AI. We could probably find out in a very fast time if there has been similar accidents, similar things we can learn from in order how do we use this now in the crisis we are facing. Just take your tour. We have the tour around the world with annual conferences, and it's been amazing to see the different cultures and cuisines and learning for the exchange of experiences in different ways in doing emergency management. And I think it's very important that we understand the culture differences between us. There's a lot to learn when we are in Africa. They have ways to do it. India, otherwhere. So it's not only in Europe and US we do the right things. We have to communicate and learn from each other. We have done different research projects. I don't go through the details here, but they are funded. Some of them are funded by the European Commission, by the World Bank, and we have funded some of them ourselves. I will just take you through some of them where science have been important. We did one project called Asset, and we did this before the pandemic. It was about communication in pandemic. And actually, all of you probably remember the swine flu, which had an outbreak in Mexico, and soon to 73 countries. And the WHO, they said, oh, this might be a bad pandemic. What happened was that actually it was a mild flu, and then they started with mistrust that maybe this was something WHO said in order to give more vaccines by the pharmaceutical companies. And our role in this project was to look at how do we restore the trust between the public and the authorities in a pandemic situation. And this was before the COVID-19 pandemic. And we did certain investigations, and we actually invited in 8 cities in Europe. We invited 50 people, different gender, different ages, different backgrounds, and we asked them certain questions about what would you do when you get sick in a pandemic and an epidemic. And some questions came out, some answers came out, which was important. And one was said, we want to know the truth, whatever bad it is. That's a very important message. And the other one was that we like to be involved. How can we be involved? Not only a direct communication from the authorities to the public, but what we call participatory governance. So that was some of the conclusions, and it was a good background when the pandemic really hit. We also participated in another project looking at climate change and how it can affect our cultural heritage. This project looked at 3 areas, one in Italy, a medieval city, and 2 sites in Crete. And what we developed was a platform where we looked at how can we maintain these cultural sites and what is the possibility in order that this can be worn down and would need help in order to be restored. And this should probably interest you even more. We participated in this project together with the World Bank. It was the state of the civil protection in the world, typologies, good practice, and economic returns. This looked at all the civil protection around the world, looked at their good side, their lack of equipment, etc., etc. Unfortunately, this report was never published. And I would really like to see that this could be taken up again. And with the present situation we have in the world, it is needed to know how well prepared is the civil protection worldwide and how can they be improved. Back to the Impetus project, which we have just ended. This is a smart city solution. And what we developed in this project was different tools that could be used in order to make the cities more resilient. For example, a firearm detector, bacteria detector, etc., as you see on the right on this. And here, science is important, using big data, using artificial intelligence in order to predict what can happen in the city and how can we prevent or try to take down any threats. A little bit about what we think is important in emergency management in teams is we have to have one language when we communicate worldwide on emergency management. And we have started what we call an international qualification certification, TQC and TQAC. And this have now so far been introduced. We have candidates certified in these 10 countries, and we are pushing this worldwide. And everything is done online, that people go on, they get qualified, they upload the data, and they do the examination. And by this, we have a common way and understanding of what is emergency management, what is the background, etc. And we are pushing this forward. And all what we do has been done on a voluntary basis. I like to end with what we will do next year. Namely, we will go to India, where we will have our annual conference. And by this, we will take up what we did in South Africa. And knowing the largest population in the world is in India, they have a very good educational system. So we very much look forward for that. And after 24, I would like to give a recommendation to yourself. We have not decided where to be. Maybe it's the time to be back in Europe. And could we invite ourselves to do a joint conference with yourself? Thank you.
Thank you. I'm very sorry for pushing you, but we don't have time for questions. And anyone, don't hesitate, questions, give to Harald in lunch break. Thank you.